So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming all the way up to the 6th floor for this. So I'm Sean Robertson from the Scottish Fisheries Coordination Centre, and today I'm going to be talking about how we're coordinating salmon conservation using interactive dashboards. And this talk is a bit personal for me. It's a culmination of sort of my 8-year in fisheries conservation so far. So I've got a lot to talk about today, so we'll give you a little bit of information about the Scottish Fisheries Coordination Centre. If I ask for hands up, has anyone in the room heard of us? Oh, there's a couple, so that's really good, but there's a lot who haven't, so I'll give you a bit of a background on us. Then I'll talk about the importance of salmon, why I'm focusing on this key species. Then we'll look at the wild salmon crisis and the challenge that our members are trying to address. And then finally, we'll leave off with the legacy of this project. So first off, about the Scottish Fisheries Coordination Centre, or SFCC is my preferred acronym. So SFCC was founded back in 1997. The centre's nearly as old as I am, and was founded with a mixture of fisheries trusts across Scotland coming together with the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency and the Marine Directorate or Scottish Government, as lots of people were collecting data related to fisheries in slightly different ways. So the centre came together to standardise these data collection protocols and make sure that data is comparable across different catchments in Scotland. So we offer protocols and also training in these protocols for electrofishing, habitat surveying and fish scale reading, as you can age a fish by looking at the rings on a fish scale. But since its inception in 1997, the centre has evolved somewhat to keep up with the modern requirements of our members. We maintain an electrofishing database so people can securely store electrofishing data across Scotland. And more recently, we promote the use of GIS tools. A couple of examples of these are we maintain Survey 123 forms and dashboards so that anglers, citizen scientists and our members can report diseased fish and invasive species, like this invasive pink salmon here. You might have seen some BBC News articles about these fish in the past few years, and you might see some more articles in the coming months as there could be an invasion on the way. One of the other large projects we managed a few years ago was the Salmon Pressures Project, which matched out the spatial extent of pressures affecting wild fish across Scotland. And we did this for 27 different factors like pollution, escaped farm fish, increased river temperatures and degraded habitat. So now looking at the wild salmon challenge. On the left, you can see the map here. There are 44 different fisheries districts across Scotland, and we work with all of them. Now, back in 2008, there was a national fisheries management planning project that was undertaken with funding from the Scottish Government to really sort of standardise what all these different organisations are doing in these areas. Now, those plans were created nearly 20 years ago and are well out of date. So we sought to update these plans for 44 districts, but to make use of more recent GIS technology, to make the plans more engaging, accessible, and to get the most out of the data that's recorded for them. So that's kind of the challenge we're addressing, but now I'll talk a little bit about the importance of salmon and why I'm focusing on this keystone species. So salmon are an indicator species. They migrate from freshwater to marine environments and then back. So they're exposed to a lot of pressures along this migration. And if you have healthy salmon populations in your river, it's a good indicator of ecosystem health. But as wild salmon come into freshwater and spawn, they die off. And as their sort of carcasses wash up on the riverbanks, they provide nutrients that are uptaken by forests. And as they migrate from the marine environment back to freshwater, they bring in marine nutrients that wouldn't come back into the system without them. And many interventions to benefit wild salmon also have a wider impact on freshwater ecosystems. Moving a barrier to enable fish access will also restore hydrological processes, allowing kind of river gravels to move down the river as they should do and improve habitats. But salmon aren't just important ecologically, salmon are also very important in a cultural sense for us. So here I've got a 3D scan of a Pictish standing stone. This was taken from the village of Ederson, near where I grew up. And to look at it, it's not a very great image, but if we enhance it a little bit, you can see that there's a salmon that's been carved onto the stone. And it's estimated this was done around 700 AD, but the stone itself was erected much earlier, around 1500 BC. But the age of this shows that salmon have been important to us culturally for a long, long time, and indeed there are many other examples of this dotted across Scotland. But it's not just historically, but salmon were important to us. Very recently, in the 20th century, salmon netting provided income and livelihoods for a lot of rural communities in Scotland. Fish were either sent to local canneries or sent down to London to market. And there are some remnants of this industry. It's not done anymore because of the conservation status of Atlantic salmon, but you can see remnants of this industry in ice houses that were dotted along the Scottish landscape, used to store ice and to send the fish down to market. And even in modern times, salmon angling is an important part of the rural economy, but the way angling is done has shifted to recognise the conservation status of the species, and most 96% of salmon angling is catch and release. And we're also working to improve the way that catch and release is done to ensure fish are released back into the environment in the best state possible. So that's a little bit about the importance of salmon, but salmon are also very important in my journey in freshwater conservation. After graduating from the University of Aberdeen, I got a summer placement with the Spey Fishery Board, and then a full-time job up in the Cowley Sutherland, where I learned techniques such as sort of habitat mapping, electrofishing and fish processing, some radio tagging. And this isn't me and the dog just out for a jolly. We're downloading vital temperature data from rivers in the top of the catchment. It's purely coincidental. That's the only thing that would tire that dog out. And now I'll look a little bit at the wild salmon crisis that you might have heard about in the news in the past few years. So we don't have absolute estimates of salmon numbers across Scotland. That would require us to have a fish counter at the bottom of every single river, which we don't have the resources for. Instead, the best sort of estimate of population numbers we have is catch records. And you can see here in this graph catch records from the 1950s. But the really sort of take-home message here is that 2023 had the lowest catch numbers on record. And this is also reflected in some of the juvenile assessments that are done. So salmon populations are in crisis, and we have a responsibility to try and do something about it. And this leads us on to revisiting the management plans that I mentioned earlier. So the format for the management plans, these story maps, was demonstrated to us by the Forth Rivers Trust, who debuted a catchment management plan for the Forth and Teith. And this was a really good example of what the technology is capable of, but we had sort of more of a national focus, and we're thinking, how can we take this concept, upscale it to Scotland as a whole, and get a bit more analytical insights out of the data we collect for it. So to create these management plans, we first looked at the previous ones to create a template, and what are the common sections that were in all these plans that are actually really important. So we all have an introduction, a bit about the management arrangements in the district, what organisations are there, what are the key partners. We have a bit about the catchment, what fish species are currently present, any information on subcatchments, environmental conditions, or really bespoke local conditions. And then this was the key part for us here, was this actions. So all the previous plans had a sort of table of actions. What is it the trust would hope to achieve over the next 5 years? Is it getting some tree planting done, removing a barrier, doing some peatland restoration? And this was what we identified as a really key bit for the GIS component. And we could record all sorts of other information like the objectives of the action, the resources required, any costs, challenges, etc. So a bit more about that later. We looked at enforcement, as our members have enforcement powers to prevent fish poaching, so how that legislation is enforced, and are there any gaps. Any education work with local schools and community groups, and any monitoring that's done either as part of national objectives like the National Electrofishing Programme for Scotland, or just local monitoring. Now, we were working with 44 districts managed by 27 different organisations, all with varying levels of experience in GIS. Some have a dedicated GIS officer who's far better than I am, and others have no members of staff. So for them, filling out an Excel template was a bit of a challenge. So we had to have an approach to these management plans that worked for everyone. So we decided on the actions being the GIS part, and we thought an Excel template is probably the most accessible way for everyone to get started on that. So we put together an Excel template that we sent out, got people to fill in with their priority actions. They sent that back to me, and I created a feature layer, compiling all of them together in ArcGIS Pro. And then we created 44 blank story maps and web maps that we gave editing access to our members to, either through creating new accounts for them in ArcGIS Online or through partnered collaborations. So next up is an example of one of these finished story maps. Don't try to read it, it's going to jump around really fast, but it's just to get an idea of what it looks like. So here's the Kyla Sutherland. It's where I used to work, but I'm not playing favourites. So you can see there's a nice text-based introduction section, followed by a really nice visual tour of the catchment and all the sub-catchments, again, some more text and imagery, which is then followed by the sort of historical management actions to give a bit more context to the plan and let the users know what's happened in the past that's of note, followed by the fish species that are present. We see our friend the Atlantic salmon there, followed by brown trout. But this is a really nice visual way of communicating that information that's much more accessible than a 50-page PDF. And there's the EO protesting about being measured. But we're able to bring in some extra data on electrofishing surveys and the health of juvenile populations, and also on sort of smolt numbers of out-migrating fish. So it's been a really good tool that's really visual to engage with end users. And this is the sort of key part of the plans, was this priorities for management action. So we have our kind of description on the left where people can read a bit about the action and a button to zoom to a point on the map. And if a user clicks on that point on the map, they'll then get a table with the sort of strategy for the action, the objectives, costs, all sorts of other information. And this was the bit that really excited me, because you can compile this across 44 districts into a single dashboard. Now, the dashboards here has the actions from all across Scotland compiled into one view, over 1,300 actions, but you can filter it by a select region, a priority, or the sort of type of action. If you wanted to look at all the dam removals across Scotland, you can filter that view, or all the peatland restoration projects or tree planting projects that our members are planning. That's accessible within this view as well. But this allows us to get some really nice insights into the actions. So we can dig down into this a little bit further and look at the pressures that they're addressing. You remember at the start of the presentation, I mentioned the mapping out the 27 different pressures. So we can see 16% of all the actions across Scotland are addressing obstacles to fish passage, like dams. But there's a lot more information with this view as well, so much that I had to create a separate dashboard for the finance side of things. So using this dashboard, we can take a look at how many of the actions are funded, partially funded, or completely unfunded, which is unfortunately most of them. And we can also look at where that funding is coming from. Is it the local management organisation, any partners, or have they identified public or private finance? Unfortunately, for most of them, they're completely unfunded, so I'm still to identify that. And I would just add as well that each action was costed. Some were easy enough to cost. If a trust had removed a dam before, they knew how much it would cost. But if they knew a dam needed removed but hadn't done that before, it's kind of really difficult to cost. So the sum total of the funding shortfall I'd treat as a minimum estimate, not an absolute one. But to carry out all those actions across Scotland, we are looking at a funding shortfall of, drumroll, £257 million as a minimum. And there are some really good public funds like the Nature Restoration Fund, which gets a lot of projects over the line in Scotland, but it's only putting out about £10 million annually. So it's really just a drop in the ocean of what we need. So my colleagues at Fisheries Management Scotland are trying to look into sources of private finance to get these actions funded. So very quick recap. So we've got the first ever nationwide view of interventions across Scotland for our rivers. We've got more adaptive and collaborative planning. And hot off the press, so not in the presentation, I've also been working on an experience builder tool so people can add new points to their plans or review the existing ones without having to send me an Excel spreadsheet. They've got clearer communication with stakeholders, both at a local level, their own community, and also government, and upskilled the sector with GIS skills. A lot of the trusts and boards hadn't encountered StoryMaps or created them before, but through this project, they got the experience of that process and are now using them to communicate their own electrofishing reports and other work. And finally, the legacy of the project. So, what's next? So we've looked at pressures, we've mapped interventions, and now we're trying to get the interventions funded. So as I mentioned, my colleagues are working on the Scottish Rivers Fund to try and examine private finance for these priority actions. Now, not all of these actions will be eligible for private finance. Some companies might want to put some corporate social responsibility money towards tree planting, for example, but getting that money to fund sort of bailiff and enforcement patrols might be a bit more difficult. So a subset of these actions will be in a portfolio that will try and attract this investment. And we've also been designing a monitoring framework to try and monitor the success of the projects that are undertaken through this. So this is a big bit of work that's going to be coming down the line. And I just want to end on a little bit of a message of hope that fish can recover. You can see these small fish here. Those are outward migrating smolts. And where I used to work in the Kyle of Sutherland, there was a project we had. You see this strange looking contraption there. That's a fish trap. It's basically an Archimedes screw that pushes fish into a holding box in the back end of it. And in that particular catchment, these smolts can't migrate past the 2 dams on their seaward migration. So they get caught in the fish trap and taxied around the dams out towards sea. I know, saying I operate a fish taxi service was an interesting one. But the adult fish on their migration back to freshwater can find their way through the fish passes. So last year, this catchment had its highest number of fish in decades recorded at the fish pass. So a good sign that that's working again. And on the Perthshire River Garry, a section of this river had been dewatered for decades as I think it was SSE abstracted the water to a different catchment for hydroelectric generation. But that project saw water get restored back to that part of the river, and now juvenile fish are kind of utilising as much of the habitat as possible. So it's a really good message of hope, but for us to get these restoration projects off the ground, salmon needs, all right, there we go, cold, clean water and rivers that run free to save our iconic fish. And if we can manage to keep cold, clean water in our catchments, sites like this, apologies for the hasty video taken by me a few years ago, of salmon jumping at waterfalls, there we are, will be seen for generations to come. So you can see the plans, we've got them on our website, there's a QR code there, see the actions, and if you want to have a chat with me, I'll be floating around after the talks. So I'll hand over now to Sasha and Tom.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a big thank you to Sean for an inspiring presentation on the use of Survey 123 and dashboards in collaborative conservation efforts. I'm Sasha, and today Tom and I are going to be taking you through how to get started with interactive dashboards like the one you've just seen. So, first of all, what is a dashboard? A dashboard can be described as a single screen of information or a display made up of a selection of different widgets and elements. ArcGIS Dashboards is a key app-building tool that allows us to construct dashboards like this one from things like maps, charts, text, and elements. Now, this is quite a broad description, but that's because dashboards can be used for a range of different purposes. However, what makes a good dashboard remains the same. In general, a good dashboard communicates critical information clearly to a defined audience. It draws your users' attention to where it's needed most on the screen, and it allows your users to digest what could be quite complex information at a glance. So let's run through a quick agenda for our session today. First, I'm going to take you through some examples of some dashboards to hopefully inspire some of you to have a go at creating your own. I'm then going to run us a quick demo of some new features to have made their way into ArcGIS Dashboards in recent months. Tom's then going to kick us off by providing insight into how we can set up a dashboard using elements and pre-configured surveys before giving us some advice about integrating Arcade into our dashboards for some added customization. I'm then going to summarise our session today by providing you with some best practices and some top tips so that you can create an effective dashboard yourself. So to break this down a little bit more, dashboards can be broadly categorised into two groups depending on their purpose. And their purpose could be to inform, it could be to explain, or maybe persuade or analyse using your data. A snapshot dashboard displays a single capture of data in time. The data behind these dashboards is static, and therefore the focus of these dashboards is on information and explanation. So for example, a snapshot dashboard may tell the story behind a set of statistics where the data behind these stats isn't changing. Monitoring dashboards, on the other hand, are more suited to ever-changing data. The data behind these dashboards is dynamic, and therefore it is updating intermittently or regularly behind the scenes. Because of this, the focus of monitoring dashboards is also on status and progress as well as information. For example, a monitoring dashboard may draw attention to points of interest where these points are perhaps changing status over time, and we're going to be giving you an example of a monitoring dashboard like this today. So dashboards can look very different depending on the different information that they are communicating. And here are just a few examples from our ArcGIS Dashboards community. Now, these are monitoring a range of different things from vegetation health and biodiversity to development indexes to active fires and hotspots. Now, you can see that although these dashboards are constructed from the same widgets and elements, they can be styled very differently to suit a certain theme as much or as little as you choose. Here we can see that the examples I've shown you can be grouped according to whether they are snapshot dashboards or whether they are monitoring. So now I'm going to jump into a dashboard and show you some new features that have made their way into dashboards in recent months. So here we are in a completed dashboard on Edinburgh Park maintenance. And before Tom takes you through the process we went through in setting up this dashboard, I'm just going to highlight some key features that helped us put this together. The new More Information tool, which you can see has been added into the top right-hand corner of our chosen widgets, allows you to add in further context to your elements without taking up a chunk of text on your initial display. So this is really useful for adding in metadata, disclaimers, background context, or anything really that will help your users learn a bit more about your data without cluttering up your dashboard with different bits of text. We also now have the option for download source data features. And this allows users of your dashboard to identify any data that may be useful to them, download it themselves, and use it in other reporting tools. And this is really useful because any data-driven elements in your dashboard can use this feature. Lastly, we now have the option to add in dual-axis serial charts to our dashboard, like you can see we've done here. These charts allow your users to visualize two distinct sets of data on two different axes. And these can be combined bar charts, they can be stacked line graphs, or as you can see, they can be a combination of both, like we've used here. So that's it from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's going to take you through the process we went through in setting up this dashboard.
Thank you, Sasha. So the focus for today's talk is looking at park maintenance teams within the city of Edinburgh and how they can use dashboards to help monitor and manage their everyday tasks. The data we'll be using is the green space dataset taken from the Living Atlas, and this is a UK-wide dataset of everything from allotments to playing fields. But for today, we have pre-programmed this to only include public parks of more than 1 hectare. Now, although the parks teams do perform routine maintenance, they're not able to check parks daily for issues such as overgrown vegetation, rubbish, or vandalism. And that's where Survey 123 data can help complement their workflows. This community-collected data ensures the teams keep up to date with any issues, allowing the parks to remain safe to the public and also well maintained. This data can then be embedded within a dashboard, giving them an insight over all the city. And with this being updated with every new submission, issues are managed constantly. So looking at setting up your dashboard. So elements allow you to provide you with an informative display of your data. Now this could include things like lists. So we have a park data library on the left showing our entire data set. Severity indicators allow you to show your data with formula outputs or filters. Charts allow you to show your data in a different way, enabling you to see any patterns, trends, or anomalies. And tables allow you to see what lies behind those plotted points and polygons. We can also enhance our dashboards with Arcade. Now, if you aren't familiar with Arcade, it's Esri's lightweight, portable, and secure expression language used to create custom content in ArcGIS applications. It could be used for things like data advancement, and ultimately it can make your elements stand out a bit better. I'll go over one example of how we can use this, but if you do want to find out more, then please check out our recent webinar. So if I just jump into the dashboard. So here we have a basic version of the dashboard that Sasha introduced. I have my pre-configured map window in the center with a grayed out base map, my predefined Edinburgh City Council border, my green spaces with the hatched green symbology, and also my Survey 123 incident locations with the new animated symbols for Map Viewer. Alongside that, I have the list of parks on the left and also my traffic light indicator system on the right. But let's add a little bit more information to the dashboard. It would be useful for the teams to not only understand the location of the data, but also the details that lie behind the points. And to do so, a table is a good option. So adding an element from the left here, we can select where in the dashboard we want to add it. I will then select the table, and we want to use the park maintenance results. From here, we can select what features within the Survey 123 submissions we want to show. It'll be useful to know the date and time noticed, the issue category, the severity of the issue, and also the description of the issue. We can also take advantage of the data download option that Sasha mentioned, allowing you to download the data and use it elsewhere. Another of the tasks that the teams have to routinely perform is mowing the lawn, and understanding a time metric based on this is useful, whether it's used for internal teams or if it's used with third-party contractors. So in the same way, I shall add in a chart, go into the element option, and select in the location within the dashboard. Now this time I'm going to be using the Edinburgh Parks dataset. And from here, I want to select the features, and I want to select the park name. I want to add a series, and I'll take this from my data set where I have hectares and also mow time. I'll sort this by hectares so it's in ascending order, and it's a little bit easier to see the data. Now, within the category axis, we can change a few more settings. Now, as you can see, the labels are a little bit hard to read at the minute. So within the labels, we can change the placement so that it's not default and it's actually rotated. As well as that, at a glance, you can see that there's quite a lot of data in the lower end of the chart. So by enabling the zoom and scroll feature, we can narrow down our focus and pan through the chart. Within the value axis settings, we can change the primary and secondary axis to take advantage of that dual axis feature. So I'm going to move the mow time from primary to secondary. I'll just add in a title. I'll abbreviate this to hectares. Oops. And I'll do the same within the mow time. Within the series, we can change how the data actually looks. So in my case, I want to change the hectares from a blue colour to a green colour. I also want to change the mow time from a column type to a line and change this to grey. Within the General tab, we can take advantage of the more information. I have some already copied. And this just allows you to not take up any permanent display within your dashboard. Finally, within the chart, I'm going to take advantage of some of the actions so that we can select the data within the chart and it can dynamically change the dashboard. I'd like it to filter the results based upon what I click in the chart, flash the area within the map window, pan to the location within the map, and also zoom to the location. So when I click done, zoom in on a location, click one of these, and you can see we've zoomed in on that location, giving us some understanding. Finally, it would be good to add a little bit more visualization to the list on the left, because at a glance, it's a little bit boring. So to do so, I'm going to take advantage of some Arcade, and I have this script that I've already created. I'll go to the three little dots and go to the cog symbol to take advantage of the settings, and I'll go to the list and enable advanced formatting. If I just get rid of the existing code, paste this in. Now what this code is saying is that if the park is over 15,000 meters squared, it produces a dark green color. If it's between 10,000 and 15,000, it produces green. And if it's over 1,000 but less than 10,000, it produces a light green. Let's click done here. You can see it gives it a bit of a better feel, so you can see the size of the parks without having to sort of visualize that area. So within a few minutes, we've gone from our basic dashboard to one which has a bit more functionality and should help the teams with their day-to-day tasks. So on that note, I shall pass back to Sasha for some key takeaways.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm going to summarize our session today by highlighting some top tips from us so that you can make an effective dashboard yourself. Firstly, knowing your audience and the purpose of your dashboard is key to making it effective. What story do you want to tell, and how does your data fit into this? Answering these questions will help you navigate the most effective display for your dashboard. Secondly, draw attention to where it's needed most by making the most of the sizing, colour, and positioning of your widgets. Remember that Arcade is your friend, and you can use this for further customization if necessary, as Tom has just shown us. Last, but certainly not least, keep it simple. Pick out your most critical information and then supplement this with your widgets and elements rather than the other way round. This saves your dashboard from becoming cluttered in appearance and makes sure you're communicating the correct information. So to showcase some of these best practices in action, I'm going to summarize our session today by showing you how you can simplify your dashboard display using the mobile view feature. So here we are back in the same dashboard one final time, and the first thing I'm going to do is head to my View tab on the left-hand side. I can then hit Add Mobile View, and you can see I'm presented with a mobile pane where I can pull through any of my original elements from our previous dashboard into this mobile application. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in a header to my app, simplify this a little bit so it fits better onto our mobile display. When I head to the Body tab, this is where I can use the Copy Element button to pull through any of our original indicators. So I'm going to add in our indicators first, as these are our most important information. As you can see, when I'm copying my elements through, this is where it becomes really useful that you've given your different widgets useful names so that you know exactly what it is that you're adding to your app. Next, I'm going to add in our map so that users of our mobile app can see where these points are located within the Edinburgh boundary. And finally, I'm going to copy across our park list as well. And you can see that the Arcade code that Tom used a second ago has persevered into this view as well. So with a little bit of reshuffling, I can move my indicators and stack them alongside each other at the top of my screen or wherever they are the most obvious. So in just a couple of minutes, I've shown you how you can tailor your dashboard display depending on your audience. And the way to do this is to highlight your most critical information and then shuffle this around so that this is what displays the best. That's it from us this afternoon. We hope you enjoyed this session and learned something new. I'm going to pass back to Sarah. Enjoy your afternoon.